Always great guests on the show, and the Sounds of Simon, the UK's leading tribute to Simon and Garfunkel, are appearing at the Westcliff Theatre in Clacton on the 27th of September. It's all part of their All the Hits 1957 to 1987 tour, and Ben Bowden is Paul Simon. I spoke to him yesterday and asked where his fascination for the artist first came from.
I have no idea, but he seems to have... I read a line about Bob Dylan the other day that said... I think Bono wrote it about Bob Dylan, and he said, Bob Dylan is with you from the cradle to the grave. And I thought, that's quite an interesting line, and I thought maybe that's probably the best way of explaining my connection with Paul Simon, I suppose. He's just... Simon and Garfunkel were the sort of... the cassette that my family could agree on in the car. and it sort of went from there, and the woman who is currently my wife, we bonded over singing "You Can Call Me Al" together. She lent me a copy of Gracelands, and I loved it. And I think Paul Simon's just there, really. He's just a brilliant songwriter, phenomenal musician, and I just end up coming back to him time and time again. So.
It's weird you should say that, because one of my wife's favourite albums that she introduced me to was Graceland. Isn't that strange?
It is, yeah.
And she hasn't got, a massive collection of great albums that she loves, but that is certainly up there. And you're right, my mum and dad loved the Graduate theme.
Right, of course,
tunes,
yeah.
The songs from The Graduate to them, and I grew up with those.
Yeah, I mean, I think my parents liked it the first time around as well, but I just picked up on it in the car, really, and just remember loving it. It's very accessible as well. The harmonies are really beautiful and really, welcoming, I suppose. That doesn't sound too much, but yeah.
Now, as far as your tour is concerned, because you're doing the Sounds of Simon at the moment, we'll talk about Art Garfunkel because you have an Art as well as a Simon, but you're doing part of the hits 1957 to 1987 tour.
Yes.
That's quite a span, isn't it?
It is. It's taken over a little bit. I had this idea about a year ago that I thought, I know what I'd like to do. I'd like to do all the songs they ever had as hits, and we'll start from the very earliest. So they were, first of all, a duo called Tom and Jerry in 1957, and they were about 15, 16 years old, and they released a song called Hey Schoolgirl, which was a top 10 hit in New York, and a top 50 hit, I think, nationwide. So they did incredibly well at a really young age. And then I thought, that'd be interesting to track his development as a songwriter over the years. So we sort of start with Hey Schoolgirl, and we go through Sounds of Silence, I'm a Rock, Homeward Bound, and we finish up the first half with their last hit as a duo, which was after they split up, but it was the song America. And in the second half, we look at Paul Simon and his development as a songwriter through to release Gracelands in 1986, but the last single was Diamonds on the Soles of Her Shoes in 1987. So it sounds like quite a feat, but actually it's a really good... It's a nice journey to go on, sort of from those early 50s doo-wop songs right the way through to the sort of South African link with the Gracelands album. So yeah,
sure. And of course, they're themselves are very interesting characters, aren't they? Because they are both known to be quite difficult, as artists are. Let's be honest. And they haven't had the best of relationships together, have they? Either.
Well, I've thought about this, and I talked to Adam, who plays Artie in the band. We talk about it quite a lot. I'm not sure. They know each other. They've known each other since they were 11 years old. I'm not sure I'm still in contact with anyone outside of my family that I've known since I was 11. Yeah. Adam is, so he can kind of understand it, but I'm not at all. So I don't know. I think I think success has a big part in it as well, and they both get successful. They become successful solo artists, which then means they're probably not going to get on so well when they have to work together. But they are both really interesting people. Art Garfunkel is a big walker, apparently. He likes to walk places. He has walked across Japan when they were on tour once.
Right.
I don't know where I've picked that up from.
Well, you have to in your line of work, don't you, really?
Yes.
These little tidbits are very important.
Yes.
One thing that interests me as well is, because they are different guys, and they've both had very different journeys, but yet when they're together, you can't imagine any other two artists gelling the way they do. It's weird, isn't it?
It is, but and that's what... There's two things with this. The first is, for me, it's the constant interest of how Paul Simon can write a song like I'm a Rock, which is a song about, alienation and being on your own, and no one... He says, I'm a rock, I'm an island, I touch no one and no one touches me are lines in the song. And yet he sings these songs with his childhood best friend. So clearly he's not a rock, so I think that. But also, and again, Adam and I have talked this over probably to tedious lengths in the car, but the sound of Simon and Garfunkel is often thought to be harmony. And yet actually the sound of Simon and Garfunkel is two voices in perfect unison that then split into harmony. And I think if you listen to songs like I'm a Rock or Homeward Bound or Sounds of Silence, there's a load of unison stuff, and then it splits into this glorious harmony. And I think that's what we like, that beautiful sort of, melding of their voices together, and then it's splitting into this wonderful, wonderful sound.
And they have the most amazing capacity to make folk sound cool. I mean, I don't think anybody else would have got away with doing Scarborough Fair, for instance. No, I don't think anyone has. We do it in the show, and I have to say it's not up there with my favourites. Yeah.
No, you're quite right. They do make folk sound cool. But I think in the same way that we might say about Bob Dylan, Paul Simon is a folkie by default. He doesn't really stay folkie for particularly long. In the end, they go back to rock and roll really quickly. They're folkies because they are two people with a guitar, but then the songs quickly sort of transcend that folk tag quite quickly. But you're right, they make it sound good with Scarborough Fair.
One of my favourite Paul Simon tracks is Late in the Evening, which I really, really love, and I don't know why I love it so much. It's such a big song, isn't it? And it builds.
Yeah, it does beautifully. I think it's also from an unloved album. It's from the film he did, One Trick Pony, at the end of the start of the 80s, really. 1980 he did it. And not many people went to see the film, and it was widely panned. But the music on it is brilliant, and the band on it is wonderful. Steve Gadd on drums, who's just a phenomenal drummer. And then there's a lovely line at the end, and again, it's that, maybe you have the same, but it's that wife connection at the end that he realises that he was, going nowhere until he met his other half, and I just, again, you can connect to that. He's there with you from the cradle to the grave. So
yeah, what is the line? I know that I've been in love before, and once or twice I've been on the floor.
I've never loved no one the way that I love you.
It's just great, isn't it? I mean,
perfect.
It's funny, isn't it? Because you can't. Again, it's that songwriting process, isn't it? How on earth he came up with that line? Because it's just so natural. It's so profound, and yet it's natural.
Well, like most profundities, is that a word? I don't know, but it's a good word. But like most profound things, it's so simple and it's so perfect, isn't it? It sums it up, just beautiful. I'm sitting in a railway station, got a ticket for my destination. On a tour of one-night stands, my suitcase and guitar in hand, and every stop is neatly planned for a poet and a one-man band. Homeward bound, I wish I was homeward bound. Home, where my thoughts escaping, home, where my music's playing, home, where my love lies waiting silently for me. Every day is an endless stream of cigarettes, magazines. And each town looks the same to me, the movies and the factories, and every stranger's face I see reminds me that I long to be homeward bound. I wish I was homeward bound. Home, where my thoughts escaping, home, where my music's playing, home, where my love lies waiting silently for me. Tonight I'll sing my songs again, I'll play the game and pretend. But all my words come back to me in shades of mediocrity, like emptiness and harmony. I need someone to comfort me. Homeward bound, I wish I was homeward bound. Home, where my thoughts escaping, home, where my music's playing, home, where my love lies waiting silently for me. Silently for me.
That's great.